So good afternoon and welcome. I'm pleased to welcome you to this briefing for civil society to introduce the latest UNODC global estimates on gender-related killings of women and girls, femicide, feminicide. They were published last week on 22nd of November, a few days ago. I am Anna Alvazzi del Frate. I am a vice chair of the Alliance of NGOs on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice, the umbrella organization that helps civil society in supporting the work of the United Nations in the broad area of crime prevention and criminal justice. And I welcome you on behalf of the co-organizers, the Vienna Committee on the Status of Women, chaired by Evelyn Durmeyer here, and the Vienna Committee on Sustainable Development, chaired by Ingeborg Geyer, who is also here, and the civil society unit of UNODC. We will be joined later by the chief, Mirella Dumar. I will facilitate this briefing and the following discussion. We don't have much time, also because Angela and Maurice have to leave at 10 minutes to 4, so really we have to be very quick. We have already received some questions. I would like to encourage all those attending online to write the questions they may have in the chat so that we can address them promptly. So very, very briefly, femicide is unfortunately becoming a familiar word. Technically, it indicates the gender-based killing of women, that is killing a woman because she's a woman. For many years, this definition lacked good evidence, good data to better understand the phenomenon and its characteristics. Recent methodological work done by UNODC helps a lot in this direction. And I'm pleased to introduce Angela May, the Chief of Research and Analysis Branch of UNODC, who directed this work. So Angela, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you for giving. I will start, but then Maurice actually will present the report because he's the one that led.
Hello, sorry, for the online folks, we cannot hear, it's on mute.
Speak again. Yeah, so can you hear me?
Yeah, now works, thanks.
Oh, apology, we didn't realize whether you...
No worries, thank you.
So I was saying that we are... now, it has been a progress in seeing how we can have the best. We always talk about the best estimate. It's not the perfect estimate. It's the best that we can produce at the global regional level, what we have. And so after the first estimate, we thought we really need to also develop a standardized methodology so that we can actually lead countries to adopt the same methodology and also to push again this measurement at the national level. So we have, again, together with UN Women, developed this statistical framework for measuring the gender-related killing of women and girls. That has been approved by the Statistical Commission, so in a way has been recognized as a statistical standard also at international level. Now, maybe next one, because it doesn't go. I don't know where I need to. No, okay. I wanted to show, maybe you can you? No. Yeah. Okay. Okay, good. So, first of all, we have the universe. How do we measure? How do we consider what we have? So we have the measurement, the number of killings of women and girls. By the way, in some countries still, even the sex disaggregated data is a challenge. So, first, in a way, the first effort is to make sure that we have sex disaggregated data of the victims. And then we have the intentional homicide, because of course there are also non-intentional homicide within these killings. And so we restrict, because when we talk about femicide, we talk about intentional homicides. And then within this intentional homicide, how can we then really measure the gender-related killing? So is that red core that we need to measure? Well, the biggest challenge is how we measure the gender motivation, because crime statistics in, I would say, all countries is not recorded by saying, is this gender motivated or not? So it's just recorded as an homicide, intentional homicide. And so that has been the challenge on how we can extract, that red part. Well, we have been thinking about this in a context where we are actually working to innovate crime statistics in general. And so to move from just, recording events, criminal events, but characterizing those events. So we are, through also the application of international classification of crime for statistical purposes, to really also advocate for national systems, not just to record events, but to characterize that events, so that we can analyze at the end and understand what kind of. And so in that respect, one of the things that we have been using a lot is to look at the victims and perpetrator characteristics, to try to at least estimate the proxy of this gender characterization. So if we think about where and this gender-related killings happen, clearly we know that there are a lot of killings by intimate partner, and so almost by definition, these are gender motivated. But also many are also family, conducted by family members, particularly where, there is this honor killing, or where there are, if you think about Asia, dowry-related deaths, for example. But we know that it's not only at home. Femicide can also happen outside at home. And so particularly when there are authority and care relationship, and also through unknown. And so what we did with the framework is to say, what are the issues that could be recorded with homicide that then can give us the tick and say, if one of this happens, we know is a femicide. So, and you see here the 8 characteristics, for example, the record of previous violence or harassment, for example, the experience of trafficking in person, or sexual workers, or, the way how the body is disposed, etc. So we're basically now, we are working with countries is to say, when you see an homicide, can you look at these characteristics and say if these characteristics were there, so that then would help us to measure femicide. And so what we have basically is that is the element that of the killing that happens at home that now we can measure through the victim and perpetrator characteristics. So among you see there, basically there are 3 blocks, what we call data blocks. One is the data blocks of women and girls that have been killed by the partner. Another one is the women and girls killed by family members. And then those women killed outside home, that they have one of those 8 characteristics. Now we can only measure these 2. There are, and as we can see in literature, is very great percentage of the femicide happens at home. So we are not missing many, but we are still missing. And so the efforts that we are having now, we say, we stick to where we are, at least we keep estimating, because at least it tells us, are we doing better or worse? And this is the only indicator on violence against women that we have at the global level that we can measure every year, and that we can measure trend. Indicator based on surveys, where is the experience of women of experiencing non-fatal violence, is definitely the one that is more comprehensive, but is much more rare at country level, is hardly comparable across countries. So with this is the tip of the iceberg, if you want, but at least we can, at the moment, measure. And hopefully, you know, in the years to come, we will be able to measure the rest. There are many. I don't want to go. I mean, we can share the slides, but to see on what type of data and source of data that we can use to really look through all of these elements. But I want to spend more time for Maurice to actually present the data.
All right. Okay, just a second. Maurice, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Angela. Maurice is Maurice Dunajski. Did I say it well? Yes, associate expert working in the research branch. And as Angela said, they have been so kind to agree that the presentation will be shared on our website next to the recording of this event, so everybody can look at them with calm. Maurice.
Thank you, Anna. So what I wanted to do is provide kind of a brief overview of the findings in the report, the key sort of messages that that we were able to extract from the available data. One of the headlines really that stood out this year when we produced the estimates was that 2022 was really the highest or the most lethal violence, lethal year in terms of violence against women over the past 2 decades. So we estimate, based on available data, that nearly 89,000 women and girls were killed intentionally in 2022, which really makes it an exceptionally lethal year for women. And around 55% of these female homicide victims were estimated to have been killed by intimate partners or family members. This means that on average, more than 133 women and girls were killed every day by someone in their own family. So someone whom we would normally expect they could trust and be safe from. Now, what we have found also in the previous reports is that this type of violence and homicide really affects all world regions and all countries. No country is immune to this kind of violence. But there are some notable differences between regions and subregions, both in terms of the absolute burden of lethal violence against women, but also in terms of the rate. So if you want the risk of a woman falling victim to this kind of violence. What stood out in the 2022 data, so the data that is presented in the most recent report, is that for the first time since we've started producing these estimates in 2013, Africa has emerged as the region, one of the big world regions with the largest number of absolute number of female intimate partner and family member killings, surpassing Asia, which was previously the region with most killings in absolute terms. And the same also applies when you look at the risk, so the rates of female intimate partner and family member homicides per 100,000 women. Again, here Africa is the region where women are most at risk, with a caveat that in Africa, data availability still remains a challenge, and so these estimates come with some uncertainty that should be added. The data also reveal that there's a very strong gender dimension in homicide, and this is also something that we touch on in the global study on homicide, which will be released on Friday. What these data show is that really the overwhelming majority of homicide victims globally are men, 80%, roughly 80% are men, but that women and girls bear a disproportionate burden of lethal violence that is committed in the home. One way to talk about this disproportionate burden is to look at the share of all male and all female homicides that are committed inside the home by intimate partners or family members. This is what you see on the bottom right. Of all male homicide victims in 2022, only around 12% were killed by their intimate partner or family member. And most of these killings are actually done by other family members, not female intimate partners. When you look at, however, at the number of female homicides, here really the shares change drastically. And you see that more than half of all female homicides committed in 2022 were committed by intimate partners and family members. And then if you look, for example, at the total number of killings committed by intimate partners, there the share of female homicides increases even more, and we estimate roughly 66% of all intimate partner homicides are committed against women, so they're female victims. The gender burden of homicide is also apparent in all world regions, but there are some differences. What is noticeable, for example, in these regional estimates is that regions where general homicide levels are typically quite high, so we can think of the Americas, Latin America in particular, but also Africa, there what we see really is that the male intimate partner and family member homicide share of all male homicides tends to be much smaller. If you go to a place like Europe, where there tends to be fewer homicides, there will be a much more equal share between men and women. And this is because in places like Latin America, most male homicides really occur in the context of organized crime violence or violence related to socio-political conflicts, right? And this kind of explains the pattern that we see here in the figure. If we talk about trends, really, I think one of the main messages is that there isn't really much change. This really is a sticky problem that is not going away, and regions overall are seeming to make very little progress. So while we see a slow reduction over the last decade in the number of female intimate partner and family member killings in Europe, this decrease has been very, modest, I would say. If we look at data from the Americas, we see an opposite trend. It's going in the opposite direction, increasing, especially, I would say, since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Based on the available data that we have at UNODC, it's very difficult to provide reliable trend estimates outside of Europe and the Americas. This is because countries don't submit data on a regular basis to UNODC that it would allow us to draw sort of very conclusive trend conclusions. But these broad regional trends really do highlight some diverging patterns within the regions. So if we look at the subregions in the Americas, what stands out is the trend in Northern America, where really since the onset of the COVID pandemic and in tandem with an overall increase in homicide, not just inside the home, but also outside the home, we've seen an uptick in femicides, if you want. Some of this is for sure a real increase in killings of women in the home. Some of the increase that you can see from 2021 onwards also relates to better data. So the US government has transitioned from a summary reporting system to an incident-based reporting system, which has allowed a much larger share of all homicides to be classified by victim-perpetrator relationship. So we've seen a decrease in the unknown homicides, basically, due to this change. So this is partly a real change, but also due to improved data coverage. If we look at the sub-regional trends in Europe, I think one thing that stands out is Western Europe, where really the number has been very difficult, or it seems to have been very difficult to get down and improve the situation, whereas Northern and Southern Europe have experienced some improvements over the last decades. And the trend that you see for Western Europe is really dominated by Germany. So Germany explains to a large extent what you see here in terms of the total number of femicides. And especially in 2020, so at the onset of the COVID pandemic, we saw a spike in killings in Germany. And you can see this also reflected in the sub-regional trend estimates for Western Europe. In Eastern Europe, the situation is also one of relative stability with a modest decline. And this trend is primarily driven by the developments in the Russian Federation. So this is just to show you that the sub-regional trends, even the sub-regional trends, hide a significant amount of heterogeneity, so differences between different countries. This is just something that we highlight in the report as well. And I would encourage you to dig further and look at the trends in the different countries, because there is a large amount of variation there. Now, going sort of outside of Europe and the Americas, where we can be quite certain about what's happening in terms of regional and sub-regional trends, I just wanted to kind of give you a snippet of data from Asia, from Southern Asia in particular, where two of the most populous countries in the region do provide some reliable trend data. In India, in relation to dowry deaths and other types of killings of women and girls that can be termed gender-related or gender-motivated, as well as honor killings in Pakistan. And what we've seen in both of these countries is a gradual decrease, at least since 2016 in India, but for a longer period in Pakistan as well, albeit with a trend reversal at the start of the COVID pandemic. And what is now still a big question mark is what happened in 2022 in India, because the Indian authorities have not yet released the crime estimates or the crime statistics for 2022. And of course, it's a very large country, very populous country. So what happens in India really matters a lot in Southern Asia, but also Asia more generally. Okay. Just to give you a sense of the data that we're working with, the coverage of data, what you can see here is that we've really been able to improve data coverage on these types of killings over the last decade. If you look at the period 2016 to 2022, we have, sorry, this is a switch, actually, this is a mix-up of the periods. Sorry, if we look at the period 2019 to 2015, we only had 74 countries that had at least one data point on femicides. If we then look at the subsequent period from 2016 to 2022, this increased to 99 countries. So we do see sort of a gradual improvement in terms of data coverage. The gaps are primarily in Africa and Asia, and in particular when it comes to trend data. So for us, it's still very difficult to talk confidently about trends in these two regions. I think I will leave it at that, so we have sufficient time for questions and answers, and I will make sure to correct this before we upload it to the internet.
Congratulations, because I really was intimidated by the length of your presentation, and you mastered through it in a very, very reasonable time. Thank you very much. I was checking the questions, but first of all, we have asked the co-editors of the recently published Routledge International Handbook on Femicide and Feminicide, Myrna Dawson and Sadie Mobayed, to make a comment, because the two issues complement each other. Unfortunately, Myrna couldn't join us, but Sadie is online. Sadie, are you there? Here, this is the handbook.
Yes, hello everyone. Hello. Thank you so much, Anna, for this kind invitation. My name is Sadie Mobayed. I am a PhD candidate in sociology at the University of Cambridge and the co-editor of this handbook that you can see now on your screen. I'm delighted to be here with you today, and thank you, Angela and Maurice, for your fantastic presentations and the thorough work that you do at UNODC to tackle femicide and feminicide globally. Through the work of internationally recognized feminists and grassroots activists, researchers, and academics from around the world, the Routledge International Handbook on Femicide and Feminicide, published in May of this year, offers the first in-depth global examination of the growing social movement to address the gender-related killing of women and girls. The collection has 50 chapters across 8 sections, covering the current state of knowledge, including theoretical understandings and perspectives, data and methodological considerations, the prevalence of femicide and feminicide, and its characteristics across countries and world regions. Our aim was to be as intersectional, interdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary as possible to achieve a global dialogue. In my role as a discussant today, I would like to bridge some similarities between the data presented in the brief today and the content of our handbook. First, the extent of femicide and feminicide prevails all around the globe, with a total of 50 chapters, as I said, more than 120 contributors, and a scope of all the world regions in 30 countries. One would think we have had exhausted all possible contributors and topics related to femicide and feminicide, yet that's far from the case. And this is why efforts coming from international organizations such as UNODC and UN Women remain of utmost importance. Second, and this was thoroughly addressed by Maurice, women are killed differently than men. And this has been shown in the brief. Women and girls are disproportionately affected by homicidal violence at home at the hands of family members, partners, and acquaintances. However, as covered in part 5 of the handbook, concerned with understanding femicide and feminicide subtypes and contexts, Some countries, such as Mexico and El Salvador, are experiencing an unprecedented peak of femicide and feminicide in the public realm with firearms. Looking into these contextual particularities matters, particularly if we aim to design successfully localized public policies. In part 5 of this handbook, we also touched on topics concerned with femicide and feminicide beyond the intimate partner sphere, including sex-selective abortion, systemic sexual feminicide, honor-based femicide, femigenocide, sex work feminicide, gang-related femicide, trans-feminicide, and femicide as war. Another point I want to touch on that echoes the brief is that underreporting remains abysmal in some regions. This concerns not only quantitative data, but also other forms of knowledge production. We maneuvered these challenges by enhancing collaboration across fields, disciplines, and career stages. For instance, almost all the chapters are co-authored, and this required a rigorous and careful reading of the femicide and feminicide knowledge-making landscape. I'd like to bring some examples which strengthen the importance of collaboration across sectors, including the relevance of highlighting qualitative data on femicide and feminicide. As we're aware, these are not just numbers, these are lives cut short by male violence against women and girls. Part 3 of the handbook is specifically on data and methodological considerations, which is divided into 3 chapters, focusing first on official data, primarily collected by states and governments. The second chapter is data produced by activists, which is of paramount importance as well to understand the extent of femicide, particularly in regions where there's still a lot of underreporting. And the third chapter is about observatories. Observatories and watches who also work to increase public education, awareness, and accountability. In these chapters, we have triggered discussions with people working in Mexico, Canada, Poland, Venezuela, Russia, France, Colombia, Argentina, just to mention a few. And we designed a particular methodology to work on this section. So first, each chapter brings together a group of contributors who were invited to collaborate and co-author the chapter, and to bring in their perspectives on the context that they were working on. So across each chapter, each contributor or individual group had to respond to a series of questions, which us as co-editors thought previously. And we requested written responses. And then the collective writing was a series of exercises in which we received these answers, then highlighted some themes, and then strengthened further discussions with them. And this proved to be a very rich methodology, as we could then become more aware of the data gaps and also the relevance of qualitative work on this matter. Another relevant chapter to bring perspectives from underreported regions, for instance, was the chapter about Afghanistan, whereby we had the privilege to include the voices of Mohammad Ibrahim Dariush and Farzana Adel, both from the Gender Equality Research Organization in Afghanistan, who, together with a student working at the University of Guelph in Canada, co-wrote a fantastic chapter of feminicide in Afghanistan amidst the Taliban's takeover, whereby a wide range of women's rights were drastically curtailed and violated. So this was a mechanism as well in which we could shed light into areas that might not have had so much knowledge produced. And finally, I want to finish with a shared recognition that the global human rights movement against femicide and feminicide would not exist without the many survivors, families, and friends who have turned their losses into prevention efforts, advocacy, and activism. Accessible information that speaks to broad and multiple audiences is vital for knowledge building and our efforts to prevent feminicide and femicide. For this reason, I celebrate the dialogues and discussions sparked by UNODC's and UN Women's brief on this matter and the Routledge International Handbook on Femicide and Feminicide. Thank you. You can find more information about the handbook on that link in your screen. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Indeed, there is a question for you to share the table of contents of the handbook, but this we can maybe put together in the material that we make available on our website after the presentation. And thank you for raising the issue of civil society. That is, this briefing is for civil society, and so we will follow up then also when Mirella takes the floor. So in the chat, we have several comments more than questions. So we have comments in French, comments in Portuguese, and actually the issue of the language barrier was raised. Okay, unfortunately, we can do this in English only. We apologize for those who cannot follow fully, but thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for being here.
We will translate it in Spanish.
Okay, the publication, Angela is telling me, is going to be translated into Spanish. So this is already something, but here we had French and Portuguese.
Last report was also translated into
okay,
French.
Very good. So
somebody wants to volunteer?
Yes, exactly. This is a good point. If any NGO who has the possibility wants to support the translation of some of this publication, I think that UNODC is open to this type of collaboration. It happened before. So I know that there are questions, and I would like to give the floor to Linda Wittong, who asked one question. So I don't know, Linda, are you there? Can you?
I am definitely here. Good morning from California, very early in the morning. In California and other areas of the United States, we have found a direct correlation between non-lethal strangulation and the predictability of being killed in the future by a domestic partner or by a suspect who is not an intimate partner. We've also found a correlation to terrorism and to killings of law enforcement officers. It's labeled the God complex, and the California District Attorney's Office does regular seminars on that issue. And I think your work is fantastic. Do you think in the future you're going to be able to gather that type of data? And the reason I ask that is because where our jurisdictions have implemented policies in terms of crime prevention, when someone is arrested for attempted strangulation, they treat that as almost like an attempted homicide, and the crime rate and the homicide rate or femicide rate has gone down. So the hope is that you'll be able to collect this data in the future. What would be your observation on that? And thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that there is a connected comment question from Jeannie Sarson. Jeannie, are you there? Or Linda McDonald?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you very much for all the information. And I did read the report, and it's always a mind bender. It doesn't matter how many times we go around the many issues of violence against women and girls. But my question was, I've been working with women who have been tortured by non-state actors, including in their family. And just like Linda just said around strangulation, but also what I am hearing is in some of the research, including I was on a panel with a forensic scientist from Honduras, and she was talking about the mutilation before the women are killed or the girls are killed. So I was wondering if you have any information that would direct us to how much mutilation women and girls suffer before they are die by a femicidal killing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeannie. If anyone wants to ask questions online, please raise your hand or make yourself visible in the room. I don't know if we have any questions. No questions? Ana Paula? Thank you.
Since I was put in the spotlight, I can ask a question. So it was very interesting presentation. So thank you so much for taking the time and giving us this briefing. And I was wondering, apart from translation, are you working with any dissemination efforts with other parts of the world, apart from here, Vienna? That would be my question.
Thank you very much. I know that Evelyn has a comment, if you want to tell us about that.
Thank you, Anna, for giving me the floor. Thank you also for your presentation. I am also, my first case as a criminal lawyer was a case of honorary killing. So I might be interested in this topic, and I would like to briefly introduce you the report by the Institute of Conflict Research in Vienna that has been published in April, May of this year. And it's about, they call it women murders and not femicide or feminicide. And it covers the period of 2010 till 2020. And they used a it's in German, unfortunately for you, unless you are good in German. Okay. And they used a quantitative and a qualitative method for doing their research. And they included in their presentation the age of the women, the age of the perpetrators, their income, the region they come from, and if it was an intimate partnership or in the same household. These are the main issues. And the institute was created in 1975, so it's by Viktor Frankl, who was a survivor of Holocaust. And the term femicide is from 1976, as you know, yes? It was by Diane Russell. She was here in 2013, if I remember correctly. And I would just refer to the results of their research. And what's strange for me is most of the killing occurred for women who were around 70, and they had all disabilities. And the killings were done by the perpetrators were men in the same age. And there were not more increasing killings during holiday seasons. So I think this is quite interesting research they have been doing in this institute. And they also concluded with some policy recommendations for the researchers like you, for the politics and also for the media, for schools and whatever recommendations are possible. So this is what I would like to introduce here. And they also recommended not to make a comparison between the countries because the legal systems are different, the data are different. So also they use EG, and EG refers to the data from UNODC. Thank you.
We have another question from the room, please.
Yes. Hello. I prefer to stay anonymous. I am myself a victim of domestic violence. As you say, madam, I come from a very well-known family, and I am not in the statistic. And I would like to ask to all of you, mostly here women, we should, thank you guys that you also join us. As a mother of 3 boys, I raised them to respect all genders. Only I would like to urgently suggest that we should have a way to invest more on the education of girls and boys before the puberty. I guess that's the best, how to deal with this subject, because we are raised and educated from small on to cover our father's problems, to respect our fathers, our uncles and neighbors. And this is still 2023 and still going on like this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have another couple of questions in the chat that the speakers will address directly. And the last person I would like to check is Linda McDonald, if Linda wants to add something.
Well, I just wanted to add to Jean's question about the brutality or before femicide, if there's any thought of including research on non-state torture, because non-state torture is very brutal against women and girls, and it is often occurs in the brutality before femicide.
Thank you very much. So you have speakers quite rich. Sorry.
I wanted to add the method of the killing, because in the first place is the knife, the kitchen knife, and the second is strangulation. So no firearms.
It depends where we are, because firearms, most of the homicide in Latin America is done by firearms, while in Europe is knife, indeed. Now, can I go back? So going back to the question on data comparability, that's why we have a statistical framework. The statistical framework is not based on legal concepts. I mean, Maurice has shown India as an example. And in India, there is not, the dowry-related deaths are considered in a different way than homicide. But in our framework, so we are looking at killings with certain characteristics, however they are considered by the legal framework of countries. So that's why we have the framework. The framework is meant to be comparable. It's meant to have data that are comparable across countries. So that is one. And also, we use statistical methods where we don't have data. We use statistical methods to ensure that we estimate also those that are not in the current statistics. So, because that's definitely something, a very important part of it. Then, the questions on the granularity of the data. So the torture, the body, how is done, or more who is doing it is a non-state actor, law enforcement, etc. We don't have that granularity at global level. I mean, again, we have issues in having, the granularity that we just need in order to have a victims and perpetrator relationship. But that's where exactly the statistical framework is. And if you may have seen in the characteristics that we hope countries will start measuring for homicide, for example, one is exactly this. How is the body being done, has been their previous history of torture, of violence. So that's where we hope to raise also the capacity of the countries. But I was very also intrigued by these things that I was saying about when, for example, attempted strangulation has been seriously handled in criminal justice, then the femicide went down. And so it would be great to have that kind of data and information. And even if we don't have it at a global level, we can make a spotlight, like the next report. We can have, maybe Anna, through you. Yeah, no, if you, to get, I mean, we cannot include 100, but if there is 2 or 3 of the things that we are discussing, is there an example where we can present data that goes beyond the home? Just that to give a flavor of what are the issues. And also, and I can tell you, we have been also thinking, do we have evidence of what works? But really what works? Do we have evidence, scientific evidence on really what works? It's striking. As Maurice said, Friday we will release the homicide report. And one of the things that you see when we look at the different type of homicide is striking. Like organized crime homicide, you see that can quickly change. So there are policies maybe dictated by gangs, but still, there are things that can happen that can even quickly reduce or increase homicide. Gender-related killing is flat compared to the rest of our homicide. So what does it work? Maurice, over to you. What do you want to add?
No, I think you've answered the questions, hopefully, sufficiently. I just wanted to show you the time.
Yes, you have to go. Just to tell you that there were a couple of questions about specific countries, about specific, unfortunately, they have to leave. So data on specific countries. Will the data be published online? Where can people access it?
For those of you who are interested in digging into the data, we have a data portal, UNODC data portal, which where the homicide data can be disaggregated by intimate partner, family member, killings, and there's a specific tab on gender-related killings. So I would invite you to look at the data portal for questions about specific countries and the data we have available.
Thank you very much. We have to let them go because they have to make another presentation to the media, and so we are very,
thank you for having us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Mirella Dumar, the Chief of the Civil Society Unit of UNODC, who has joined us. Thank you, Mirella.
Thank you, Anna, and I'm really very pleased that Angela and her team could be here to present this very important information and data. I wanted to say to Angela, but she left, that she was really, when she joined, there was very little information on femicide. There was the homicide report, of course, but she really managed to differentiate the data and make sure that the information also on femicide was there. I'm pleased to join here because in my capacity as Chief of the Civil Society Unit, which is a bit the entry point for civil society in UNODC, we work with the Alliance of NGO on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice, who are our partner organization on all sorts of issues related to crime, from transnational organized crime, but also all the issues related to the Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice, including during the congresses. And even if there hasn't been, let's put this way, from my point of view, enough work done with civil society organization on the issue of femicide, there is a great potential, and we know that without civil society, the protection of the victim at a very early stage and the service they provide to them is invaluable all over the world. But it's also important that civil society works in partnership with government. And this is why we have, through our project, always brought together the government, academia, civil society, to try to look at the issue and find solution together. And as my colleague, I'm supposed to do some conclusion. I'm sorry I could come a bit later, but there was an indication that the data that is available is really in the Western, if we think about North America and Europe, and the importance of trying to dig the data. And I'm really grateful to the presenter before that in their research they could also collect data from Afghanistan, for instance. This is really very important because data speaks and can, if brought also properly to the media, can really alert the attention. I would like more also to speak about where the importance of civil society and looking more in the history brought up this issue really to the attention of the world. I'm Italian, but actually with Syrian origins, and I know I went to Italy to finish the school. I was the age of 16, and And there was a big case, which was 2 girls, which one was killed, one was raped and tortured by young, I mean, they were even not 18, and they were found out in the cover of a car. And the journalist was there at the right time to make the horrible picture of the one who survived completely, you know, injured, and the other one was dead. And this brought to the attention, you know, unfortunately, you have to wait for a very clamorous case to bring this attention to the media. And the law also in Italy concerning violence against women changed, because before it was, but I'm speaking, you know, we are speaking of the early 80s, late 70s, so things have moved on and changed so much. But again, looking at that case and in this period, as a young teenager arriving in Europe completely unaware about certain things, it really took my attention, and I was very careful, even if my parents were not with me, because you know, you learn by seeing what's happening around you. And then when I looked a bit more carefully in the case, there was a pro bono lawyer, and here we have a lawyer in the room, and very importantly, the time that you devote for voluntary for an NGO is really invaluable, because really they made this girl go to the process, which were horrible at that time, because it happened that the 3 boys were for a very well financed family from the bourgeoisie of Rome, and she was, you know, she was attracted. They thought that, you know, they would going for a nice evening with 3 guys with a nice car, and they end up tortured and killed one of them. So and this is where it's so important to have really civil society who can invest voluntarily their time. And at that time, there was also a group of feminists that helped them a lot. And we have the privilege to live in countries such as here in Austria, that also I was very much alerted, because in my neighborhood 2 years ago, there was one tobacco where the owner was a woman. It was burned, and she burned in her tobacco place just because from her partner, he put her on fire. So we see this case, and this case go to the media, and therefore, you know, we can also collect data. But yes, this gives us that if in this country we have already this data, could you imagine, you know, what's happening in other countries where we cannot get data, and where we need to help all these NGO, women NGO, who can help us in this issue. So I'm sorry if I'm concluding a bit, going another tangential, but thank you again for this invitation, and thank you for having this event.
No, thank you, Mirella. You went in the right direction, because I think that what we heard today is, as you said, is really a success of the work of UNODC, because the data that Angela was showing, they come from governments. And this is really a very, very important achievement that progressively governments, they are learning that they have to collect this type of data, that they have to look at all these disaggregation, at all these characteristics. So for us, for civil society, we have to keep advocating for more of this type of work. But this is the return, is the help that we finally get from governments in taking it seriously and collecting data that are official data. You know? So putting the two things together is very important. And as Sadie said, it is a mix of quantity and quality, because we have to describe the context, we have to describe the characteristics, we have to get the information on the modus operandi, and to hear from victims. So we have really quite a lot of work in front of us. And civil society, we really need to have this space for this type of discussion. So we are really glad that we had the opportunity today to do this, putting together the official communication from UNODC and the voice of civil society. There were more than 50 people connected. I'm very glad for this. I repeat, the recording of this briefing is going to be online. The presentation from Angela and Maurice will be online. There was a question on the link to the data portal. We will put this online on the website of the Alliance. The website of the Alliance is crimealliance.org. So you will be able to find all this information over there. So I think that we have to close. We will be able to speak with those in the room after closing the meeting, because we were committed to stick to 1 hour, and it is 4. We have to leave the room. Thank you very much, and have a good afternoon. Thank you. Bye-bye.